Come for the bread, stay for the politics. My name is Ben Walsh, and this is Let Them Eat Bread. This week on Let Them Eat Bread, we have a very special episode for a number of reasons. One, this will be a shorter episode than most of our usual episodes, so just be aware of that. Also, you should know that we have an exciting special guest for you, who I will introduce a little later. And I have an announcement to make for you all. If you're watching this right now, you should know that tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be going on my friend's podcast, Biting Commentary, to talk about foreign policy and what it means for you. So I'm very excited for that. So if you can, tune into Biting Commentary tomorrow at 8 p.m. And hopefully I will see you there. But this week we have a great bread that we're making. We are making a slow cooker bread. So this is going to be a no yeast, no knead, no oven bake bread for busy people. It's going to take a couple minutes for us to throw together, and then we are just going to chuck it in the slow cooker and let it go for a couple of hours. It's going to be really easy to make, and hopefully this is a bread that you can make when you don't have time to do anything else. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mix up our dry ingredients here. So I have 3 cups of our self-rising flour here. So we're going to sift that in. So if you don't know what sifting is, essentially what you're going to do is you are going to make sure that you are using a sieve or a colander or something like that to just try and get out all the clumps in the flour. This allows the ingredients to mix better together. And you can do this for any bread recipe, but for most bread recipes where you're kneading, you're actually going to get all the bread and things in together, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Because we are not kneading our bread, it makes a lot more sense for us to sift all the dry ingredients so everything gets mixed together. The next thing, I have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. This is going to be our chemical leavener. As I said, we're not using yeast today, but we are using a chemical leavening agent to make sure our bread rises nice and tall. Last little bit, just sugar. This is not really going to add a sweet taste. What this is going to do, it's going to enhance some of the flavors we already have here. So don't worry too much about that, and just sift that in as well. Now, if you do get clumps with your sugar and you want to make sure it all goes in, you can push it through with your fingers. I'm using a white superfine sugar. Most of the time, you will not actually have to sift this. So what I do when I'm sifting sugar is I just sift it as much as I can, and then I dump the rest in. Because truthfully, it's already very, very fine granules, so you don't have to worry about that. All right, so we are going to stir this with a wooden spoon real quick. Just bring this together. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our herbs. So in this dish here, I have 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon of pink Himalayan sea salt, 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. And we're just going to dump all these in here. This is going to be a nice savory bread. It's going to be wonderful with butter and olive oil. It's going to be wonderful for sandwiches as well. And we're just going to stir this all together, just creating a bread with some nice savory flavors in it. Now, if this looks a little bit like it could be a pizza dough, there's a good reason for that. We're using a lot of the same ingredients as you would use for pizza, with the exception of the chemical leaveners. So it's not the same recipe. You should not use this for pizza dough, but it is going to look and smell a little bit like that. Next thing we're going to do, I have grated some cheddar cheese. We have about a cup of this. If you want to substitute for mozzarella, or if you don't want cheese at all, that's fine. We're really not relying on the moisture from either of these cheeses to kind of do any major work here. And I have grated this very fine. But if you want to use larger granules and you want to grate it a little bit larger, you are welcome to do that. There is really no reason you need it this small, except for just so putting it this small, what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to have more cheese spread throughout your entire dish, for the entirety of the bread here. So we're just going to mix this up with our wooden spoon here, just making sure that all the ingredients are incorporated together. Now, my cheese is clumped up a little bit because I grated it so fine. So one of the reasons that we're going to spend some time here with the wooden spoon is just to make sure that that cheese gets evenly distributed all around. And especially because we're not kneading this. So if you're concerned that your cheese is clumping or that it's not really spreading evenly throughout the bread, just take your hand and just take your fingers and work it through. Again, the only reason we're mixing this at all is really to get a decent sense that everything is mixed together, because we are not kneading it. So we won't have another opportunity other than this stirring to really bring it together. All right, so that's done there. Let's move this out of the way. The next thing we need to do is add our liquid. So as usual, we are going to create a well. So use your spoon or your hands to create a little pit in the dry ingredients you have here. And then we're going to just pour in our buttermilk. This is 1 cup of buttermilk. And this is the entirety of our wet ingredients. No eggs, no water, nothing like that. So you want to make sure you get every last drop of this. And if you're concerned about the ratio of dry ingredients, you can always add a little bit extra wet. So if you want a tiny, if you're concerned about it being too dry as it looks right now, add a tiny bit more buttermilk at this stage, and you can always add more flour later. So there's no real reason to worry about moisture, because you can put a tiny little bit more in. Again, like I always say, it is easier to dry out a wet bread than to rehydrate a dry bread. So we're just going to make sure we get every drop of this. All right. All right, I'm going to leave this out because just in case we need to move things around. All right, so we're now going to take our wooden spoon again, and we're just going to slowly fold in our ingredients and mix these together. You want to keep stirring until a shaggy dough forms. We're not looking to knead, so just be careful about how you're mixing things in. You really just want to mix just enough so that the ingredients are combined and they create kind of one mass of dough. So just stirring around here. You can already see that it's starting to come together, but some areas are going to be more moist than others, so we're just going to move it around. This, by the way, is the extent of our kneading for this whole process, so you don't want to knead any more than this, if you can help it. You just want to keep pushing the dry ingredients together until one kind of solid mass forms. And then we're going to be ready to give it some shape here. This is what I thought I might need this for. So every now and again, just scrape down the sides of your bowl and spoon, because liquid will get trapped here. And if the liquid is trapped in here, you can't use that liquid to get your bread to come together. So you just want to make sure that you're constantly moving down the sides here. You can do this with your fingers. You don't need any fancy tools or what have you to do this. Eventually, you might find that it's difficult to keep mixing this with a spoon. If that's the case, just transition to a spatula, or again, use your hands. We're just going to keep going. Now, be aware that a lot of this dry ingredient is going to sit at the bottom of your bowl. So just keep moving it around. Try and get everything incorporated to the best of your ability. If it's looking really dry, add a tiny bit more buttermilk. You're not going to hurt it by doing that. Don't add water though, right? So this recipe doesn't call for water. So we are just going to add more of the liquids that are already in it if we are really concerned about its liquid content. All right, so the spoon's getting caught on stuff here, so I'm going to start to use my hands to just kind of bring this together. And I might need some more buttermilk, but we're going to try and go without it for now. So just taking it in our hands and clumping it together. So if you've ever made pie crust, it's going to be a similar process. You're just clumping it all together, creating one mass, using the liquid that's already in there to join it all together. And again, trying not to knead. You're really just trying to combine together. So see, I have much more of a single batch of dough here, but I am going to add a little bit more buttermilk just because we are a little bit on the dry side. So if you are adding a little bit more buttermilk, you want to do it a tiny bit at a time. Think like a tablespoon or so at a time. Really not much. Because again, this isn't really meant to be a very wet dough. So just keep going until everything is all combined. Because then we're going to shape our bread and get it ready for the slow cooker. And this might not look like it's going to rise, but I'm telling you, it is going to. It's got lots of chemical leavener in it. We are using a chemical leavener that we put in, but also self-rising flour has chemical leavener in it. So that's what makes it self-rising. All right, so I've made this dough a little too wet now, but that's okay. You can see that it's a little sticky. It's all right. So what we're going to do now, this is kind of one solid mass. It's great. Just spend another second just getting that into ball form, making sure it's all together, is we're going to put it out on our work surface here. We need to flour it up first. Let's put this over here. I'm going to take a little bit of flour and just flour this work surface, make it easier for us to work with. Now remember, no kneading. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our dough out, and we're just going to lightly roll it about in the flour, and then we're going to shape it however you want. So you're going to use the cupping motion with your hands. Your hands are going to sit like this. You're going to use your pinkies and your ring fingers to shape the dough however you want. Okay, so I'm going to make mine into an oval because I have an oval slow cooker. And that's kind of the shape I want it to take when it's done. So just keep shaping it until you're satisfied with it. Mine's going to look a little bit like a football. It's all right. And if you want a round one, just make it into a round one. So you can see I've almost got the oval shape where I want it. So I'm just going to keep working it a little bit until I get it that perfect oval shape that I want. All right. Perfect. So you can see now that I kind of have my oval football shape here of my bread. So now what we're going to do with it, now I'm unsatisfied with it. Give me 2 seconds. There we go. All right, so now we're going to score it. So if you made a round loaf, you're going to score it right down the middle. You're going to score it 2 ways. You're going to do right down the middle and then widthways. But because I made a loaf like this, an oval loaf, I'm actually just going to score it with a sharp knife right down the middle. And you want this cut to be about only ½ an inch deep. All right, so our dough is ready. What now? So the next step is going to be prepare our slow cooker for this loaf, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 pieces of parchment and you're going to push them into the bottom of your slow cooker. Let me show you. So here's my slow cooker. You can see there are 2 sheets of parchment here. Just push down in. And then we're going to take our bread and we're just going to plop it right in, making sure that it is surrounded by parchment. So take a look. You can see it's right in there. And I just make sure that's in the middle. We're going to set our slow cookers to high, and then you're just going to let this sit for 2.5 hours. You do not have to do anything to it, okay? So 2.5 hours, this is going to sit here, and you can go mind your business, do laundry, do chores, whatever you have to do. At 2.5 hours, you're going to come back, and you're going to just turn it over, okay? Once you turn it over, that is going to be your cue to, that is going to be your cue to turn it over and give it another ½ hour on high, all right? That's all you have to do with it. It is so, so easy. I can't wait to try it. It smells so good. When it's done and you've turned it over for that ½ an hour, it should look done. However, if it doesn't, just keep it on high for a little bit longer and check it every 15 minutes, okay? So again, our usual test for a done bread is you're gonna knock on it with your knuckles. If it sounds like it's hollow, then probably is done. Or if you have a thermometer, which by the way is the much better way to test something like this, put it in and just make sure it hits 200 degrees. Usually we say 205, but for this recipe, it's gonna be all right because there's no raw eggs in it. We're not really worried about that. So 200 degrees is gonna be just fine. So before you set this to high, you're probably wondering, well, my slow cooker creates a lot of moisture when I am cooking with it. Glad you mentioned it. So you are actually going to put a towel between your bread and the lid. All right, so you're just going to cover this like this, and you're going to put your lid on top, and the towel is going to make sure that any moisture that comes out of here does not drip on your bread, okay? So we're going to take this, we're going to set it to high for 2.5 hours, and our guest, and then we will start to talk to our wonderful guest. Be right back.